The sharp ring of an alarm clock pierced the quiet of the early morning. Barron groaned as he pushed himself up, his body heavy with sleep. The small apartment was still dark, save for the first slivers of sunlight creeping through the blinds. It was a humble space, a worn-out couch against one wall, a small kitchen with a chipped counter, and a few mismatched chairs. The floor, though swept, bore the imprint of years of use. But Barron's focus never lingered on the space. His eyes, even in the half-light, were drawn to the one thing that truly mattered, his basketball jersey hanging on the wall. A faded number 23. It was the only decoration in his room, the only thing that made it feel like his. Barron's mother, Monica, was already up. He could hear the soft shuffle of her slippers against the tile floor in the next room, the clink of a coffee mug, and the sound of cereal being poured into a bowl. Monica's voice, tired but steady, called out to him from the kitchen. "Barron, you awake?" He rubbed his eyes and groaned again, then swung his legs off the bed and onto the cold floor. His sneakers, scuffed, worn, but still holding up, sat by the door. He slipped them on and stretched, the early morning stiffness tugging at his muscles. "Yeah, I'm up," he muttered, pulling on his old sweatshirt. He could hear the rustle of paper as Monica sat down at the small table, sorting through bills, a daily ritual she didn't talk about but Barron noticed. The weight of it hung between them, unspoken but always there. The constant struggle to make ends meet. He grabbed his basketball, feeling its familiar texture in his hands, the one thing that still gave him a sense of possibility. He dribbled it quietly as he walked out of his room, the rhythmic bounce filling the small space. Monica didn't look up as he entered the kitchen, but she didn't have to. She knew where his focus was. "You still thinking about that academy?" she asked, her voice soft, but there was an edge to it, a reminder that dreams, no matter how big, didn't come without a price. Barron paused, the ball stilling in his hands. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "I'm gonna get there. I just need to keep working." Monica sighed, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the bills she was looking at. She glanced at him, her eyes weary but warm. "Barron, I want you to go for it. I really do. But we can't afford that place. I can barely pay the rent this month." Barron knew the truth of it. They had been scraping by for years. Monica worked long hours at the local grocery store, always tired but never complaining. He knew she was doing everything she could, but the bills were always piling up, and dreams like his always seemed just out of reach. The academy was expensive, and she couldn't help with that. He had no illusions about the money it would take. "I'll figure it out," Barron said, determination in his voice. "I'll make it happen." Monica didn't argue. She never did, not with him. She just reached over, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead as she kissed him on the cheek. "You're a good boy, Barron. But don't forget, you've got a whole life ahead of you, and I just want you to be happy. Don't wear yourself down trying to get somewhere that feels impossible." Barron gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I won't. I'm gonna get better. Play harder. I can't stop now." She nodded, though Barron could see the concern in her eyes. She wasn't convinced, and maybe either was he, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not when he could still feel the rhythm of the game pulsing in his veins. He turned toward the door, the ball bouncing softly in his hand as he took one last look around the room. The apartment was small, but it was home. And home, to him, was just the start of something bigger. He stepped outside into the chill morning air, the sky still a soft shade of gray. He could already hear the echoes of a distant basketball court down the street, the squeak of sneakers on pavement, the sound of a ball hitting the ground. It was where he belonged. Monica's voice called out one last time as he stepped out the door. "Barron, don't forget to eat something." "Got it, Mom!" he called back, his voice carrying a hint of excitement now that he was free of the small, confining space of their apartment. The world outside felt wide open, and for the first time in a while, Barron could almost taste the possibility of it all. He made his way down the street, his sneakers hitting the pavement with purpose, the ball bouncing alongside him. The academy may have felt out of reach, but Barron wasn't going to let anything stop him from getting closer. Not today. Not ever. The gymnasium smelled of sweat and old sneakers, a familiar scent that Barron found strangely comforting. The sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished wood floor echoed through the high school gym as the basketball team ran through drills. Barron stood at the edge of the court, leaning against the wall, watching his teammates hustle through their warm-ups. His eyes flicked from player to player, studying their movements with a quiet intensity. He could already tell who had talent, who was just there for the social aspect of it, and who had real drive. He could see Eli, the team's captain, doing layups with smooth precision, his footwork clean and efficient. Then there was Travis, a big guy with a soft touch, dunking effortlessly on the high hoop, making it look easy. Barron had no doubt that they were all good, but none of them moved like he did. He could feel it in his bones, the way the ball connected with his fingertips, the rhythm that surged through his veins every time he made a perfect shot or glided through the air for a rebound. But he wasn't here to watch. He was here to prove something. The coach, Coach Daniels, blew his whistle, cutting through the noise of the gym. His voice was raspy from shouting commands all morning. "All right, team. Let's see what you got in this scrimmage. Barron, you're up." Barron straightened, the rush of adrenaline hitting his chest as he jogged toward the court. He swapped places with Kyle, a player who was already huffing and puffing from the previous drill. Barron didn't even look at him as he took his place, eyes locked on the hoop at the far end of the gym. Coach Daniels blew the whistle again, signaling for the scrimmage to start. The ball was passed to Travis, who took control and powered his way toward Barron's team. Barron stayed low, keeping his eye on Travis's movements, waiting for the right moment. "Watch his moves, Barron," Coach Daniels shouted. "He's quick." Travis spun, trying to fake Barron out, but Barron was already one step ahead. With a quick jab step, he stole the ball and sprinted toward the opposite end of the court. The gym seemed to blur around him as he pushed the ball forward, weaving in and out of defenders. The only sound he could hear was the rhythmic pounding of his sneakers against the wood floor. He was almost there. He saw the basket, the crowd of students watching, but most importantly, he could see Coach Daniels' face. There was something in the coach's eyes, a skepticism Barron hated. Like Barron had to prove himself, even though he was the best player on the court. It was the same look everyone gave him, like talent alone wasn't enough. Barron made his move. He faked left, spun right, and leaped for a one-handed layup. The ball arced beautifully through the air, but as it came down, it bounced off the rim. Barron landed hard, his breath coming in short gasps, but before he could react, Eli grabbed the rebound and passed the ball back out. "Get back, Barron!" Eli yelled, but Barron didn't need to be told. He was already racing back to the other side of the court, eyes scanning for his next opportunity. The game went on. Barron played with all his heart, diving for loose balls, challenging every shot, but he couldn't seem to get in the flow of the game. Every time he thought he had a clean shot, someone blocked him. Every time he thought he was going to make a play, the team collapsed on him. There was no room for the kind of creativity he knew he had. No space to show off the skills that felt second nature to him. By the time the scrimmage ended, Barron felt like a failure. His body was sore from all the missed shots, the pressure of trying to fit into a system that didn't suit him. He glanced over at Coach Daniels, who was standing with his clipboard, jotting something down. Barron's heart sank when he noticed that the coach didn't look impressed. Not even a little bit. As the team gathered around the coach for feedback, Barron hung back, his shoulders slumped, trying not to let his frustration show. His teammates were laughing, joking, talking about the upcoming game against their rival school, but Barron couldn't focus on any of it. He just kept thinking about the academy. The thought that kept him up at night, the dream that seemed so far away. Coach Daniels cleared his throat, turning to face the team. "Good effort, guys," he said, his voice louder now that the gym was quiet. "But we've got a long way to go. Eli, Travis, you're looking good out there. Barron, you've got talent, but you need more than that. You need experience. And that's something we don't have time to give you here. You'll have to take that up on your own." Barron's stomach twisted. It wasn't the first time he'd heard something like this. Every time he played, he gave it his all. But it didn't matter. Without the right connections, the right training, he was just another kid on the court. He felt the weight of it pressing down on him, the sense that he'd never be enough. He wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that he was the best player in the room but still couldn't get the recognition, or the fact that the academy he dreamed of was so far out of reach. As the team began to disperse, Barron lingered at the edge of the gym, staring at the basketball hoop. His hands were trembling, but not from exhaustion. No, it was something deeper. Something that made him feel like he was running out of time. "Yo, Barron!" Eli's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "You good, man? You're not looking like yourself today." Barron glanced up at Eli, forcing a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." But inside, Barron knew it wasn't just fatigue. It was the weight of his dream. The distance between him and everything he wanted to become. He had to make a decision, whether to stay and try to fit into this team's system, or to push harder, to break through the barriers that were holding him back. He chose the latter. "I'll be fine," Barron muttered to Eli, his voice firm. "I'll get there." Eli nodded, still not quite understanding, but Barron didn't mind. He wasn't doing this for them. He was doing it for himself, for that dream that seemed so far away, but still felt within reach if he just kept going. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, but Barron wasn't ready to leave the gym. Not yet. There was work to be done. The evening sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the apartment was filled with the soft hum of the city outside. Barron stood by the window, looking out at the dimly lit streets of Akron. His reflection in the glass was faint, blurred by the condensation on the window. He wasn't really seeing the streets or the cars passing by. His mind was elsewhere, on the gym, the scrimmage, the academy. He was still replaying the moment when Coach Daniels had brushed him off. He could feel the weight of it now, heavier than it had been in the gym. The truth stung. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how many times he proved himself on the court, he was still just a kid from Akron with no connections, no money, no way to make his dream happen. The sound of a door creaking open pulled him from his thoughts. Barron turned to see Monica walking in from the small kitchen, a plate of food in her hands. She set it down on the table between them, a simple dinner of rice, beans, and baked chicken, cheap, but filling. She smiled softly as she slid into the chair across from him, her tired eyes betraying the exhaustion of a long day. "You look like you're a million miles away," she said gently, noticing the far-off look in Barron's eyes. "How was practice?" Barron's eyes flickered toward her, and for a moment, he almost told her everything, how Coach Daniels had dismissed him, how he felt like he didn't belong on the team, how the dream of the academy seemed to slip further and further away. But he didn't. Instead, he forced a smile, trying to brush it off. "Same as always," he said, his voice quiet. He sat down at the table, scooping a small portion of food onto his plate, though he barely had an appetite. "I'm just trying to figure out what to do next." Monica studied him for a moment, her gaze steady and knowing. She'd raised him alone, and after all these years, she could read him like a book. She knew the look in his eyes wasn't just about basketball. It was something deeper, something bigger than the game. But she didn't press him for details. Instead, she reached over, her hand resting lightly on his. "You know you can talk to me, right?" she said softly, her voice a mix of reassurance and concern. Barron nodded, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. He couldn't burden her with the weight of his dreams, not when she was already carrying so much. She'd worked so hard to keep everything afloat, to make sure he had food on the table, a roof over his head. "I'm just tired," Barron muttered, his gaze dropping to his plate. "Sometimes it feels like no matter how much I try, it's never enough." Monica's hand tightened on his, a silent affirmation that she was there for him, even when words fell short. "I know, baby. I know. But you're doing great. I see how hard you work. You're not like the others, Barron. You've got something special." Barron looked up at her, his eyes searching hers, trying to find some sort of certainty in the storm of doubt swirling inside him. Her smile was warm, but there was something else in her eyes, a quiet sadness, a knowing of the sacrifices she'd made for him to have the chance to chase his dreams. "I just don't know if it's enough, Mom," Barron said, his voice cracking slightly. He tried to swallow the lump in his throat, but it didn't go away. "What if I'm not good enough? What if no one cares?" Monica exhaled, her hand moving to brush a lock of hair from his forehead. "Barron, I know it feels like that sometimes. Like the world is stacked against you. But listen to me, you are good enough. You've always been good enough. I've seen you work. I've seen you play. You're not just some kid who wants to be something. You are something." She paused, her gaze never wavering. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not to Coach Daniels, not to anyone at school. You don't need their approval. You just need to keep going, keep pushing. You've got what it takes. I believe in you, and I always will." Her words were like a balm, soothing the raw edges of his frustration. Barron closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. It wasn't the kind of reassurance that made all the pain disappear, but it was enough to remind him that he wasn't alone in this. He looked up at her again, the weight on his chest a little lighter now. "I don't want to let you down," he said softly. Monica smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You could never let me down, Barron. Just go after what you want. I'll be here for you, no matter what." Barron nodded, feeling the familiar rush of determination rise in him again. He wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stop. "I'll keep going," he whispered, almost to himself. "I'll keep pushing." Monica squeezed his hand one more time before letting go. She stood up and began clearing the table, a small but meaningful gesture of moving on from the conversation. Barron sat there, staring at his plate for a long moment, but his thoughts were already drifting back to the court. To the academy. To the dream. Somehow, he knew that this was just the beginning. The path wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be fast. But he'd make it. He had to. For her. For himself. As Monica left the room, humming softly to herself, Barron stood up from the table. He grabbed his basketball, spinning it on his finger like he had 100 times before. He walked over to the door and opened it, stepping out into the cool night air. The city of Akron stretched out before him, quiet and unassuming, but full of possibility. He could hear the faint sounds of basketballs bouncing on nearby courts, a steady rhythm that called to him. It was the sound of people chasing their dreams, just like him. And maybe, just maybe, he could be one of them. He took a deep breath and set off toward the gym. He had work to do. The gym lights flickered above, casting long shadows on the court as Barron dribbled the ball with rhythmic precision. His sneakers squeaked against the hardwood floor as he worked through a series of drills, crossovers, jump shots, quick layups. Sweat beaded on his forehead, dripping down his face, but he didn't slow down. Not today. Not when he had so much to prove. It was late, the gym nearly empty save for a few lingering players finishing their own routines. Barron's eyes were locked on the rim, his focus absolute. He could hear the ball's familiar bounce echoing in the empty space, like it was the only sound that mattered. Every shot he made, every move, felt more urgent than the last. He was practicing for something bigger, something that felt just out of reach, but close enough to keep him going. The gym doors creaked open, and Barron didn't stop. He assumed it was just another late-night player, someone else looking for a few more minutes of practice time before calling it a night. But then he heard a voice, familiar, commanding. "Hey, young fella, you need a break?" Barron's heart skipped a beat, and he froze mid-dribble. The voice wasn't just any voice. It was deep, smooth, an unmistakable sound he'd heard 1,000 times in his life. He turned slowly, almost as if he couldn't believe it, but when his eyes landed on the figure standing by the door, there was no mistaking it. LeBron James. The king of Akron himself. The man who had risen from these very streets to become one of the greatest basketball players in history. Barron's pulse quickened, and his mind raced, but all he could manage was a stunned silence. LeBron stood there, arms crossed, a slight grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. He was dressed casually, sweatpants and a hoodie, but even in this relaxed state, he exuded the same larger-than-life presence he did on the court. Barron had watched him countless times on TV, heard his interviews, read about his charity work, his commitment to Akron. But this was different. This was real. "Don't just stand there looking at me," LeBron said with a chuckle, breaking the spell. "You're working hard. I respect that. But you need to pace yourself, you know?" Barron blinked, his heart still racing, unsure of how to respond. Finally, he found his voice, though it was a little shaky. I didn't know you were in town." LeBron raised an eyebrow, as if the question itself were amusing. "Yeah, I get that a lot. It's my hometown, man. I'm always around. You don't have to be on TV or on the court to catch my attention. I know talent when I see it." Barron's breath hitched. "He knows talent when he sees it?" "I've been watching you," LeBron continued, taking a few steps closer, his tone turning more serious. "I've been keeping an eye on the local kids, the ones who really have the passion for the game. And you've got it, Barron. I see the hunger in your eyes." Barron's mind was reeling, and his heart was pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. LeBron James, one of the best to ever play the game, had been watching him? How do you know my name?" Barron asked, still struggling to process the situation. LeBron smirked. "It's not hard to find out about a kid who's got that much heart. Coaches talk. Other players talk. Word gets around, especially when you're putting in the work. I've heard a lot about you." Barron's pulse quickened. What are you saying?" "I mean, I don't know what you're looking for, but I just want a chance. A shot at an academy or something, anything to get my foot in the door. I've been practicing every day, doing everything I can." LeBron nodded, his expression softening as he listened. "I hear you, Barron. And I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like everything's stacked against you, to want something so badly but feel like you don't have the means to get there. That's why I'm here. I'm offering you a shot." Barron's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" LeBron took another step forward, his gaze locking with Barron's, and for the first time, Barron saw something in the basketball legend's eyes that wasn't just about competition, it was understanding, empathy. "I'm sponsoring you, Barron. A full scholarship. I want to help you get into a top-tier basketball academy, give you the tools and resources you need to take your game to the next level. But I'm not just giving you money. I'm giving you mentorship, too. I want to be there for you, guide you. Make sure you have everything you need to succeed." Barron's breath caught in his throat, his entire body frozen. He could hardly believe it. LeBron James was offering him a chance. A real chance. The dream that had seemed so far out of reach was now standing right in front of him, tangible, real. "But why me?" Barron managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. LeBron smiled again, this time with more warmth. "Because I see myself in you. Because I know what it takes, and I know you've got what it takes. Akron has given me everything. It's time I give back." Barron's eyes began to sting, his chest tightening as emotions he hadn't even realized were there flooded through him. He had dreamed about this moment, about someone believing in him enough to give him a shot, but to hear it from LeBron himself? It was almost too much to process. "You don't have to thank me yet," LeBron said with a light chuckle. "Just show up. Keep working. Do what you've been doing. I'll take care of the rest." Barron swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say." LeBron patted him on the shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Don't say anything yet. Just keep pushing. You've already earned it." Barron stood there, trying to gather his thoughts, his world spinning. LeBron James, the man who had been his hero for as long as he could remember, was standing right in front of him, offering him the chance of a lifetime. A chance he could never have dreamed of. LeBron turned to leave, but then paused at the door, glancing back at Barron. "Oh, and one more thing, Barron, Don't ever let anyone tell you that where you come from defines where you're going. Your work ethic? That's what will get you there. Barron nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in as LeBron disappeared into the night. For the first time in a long while, Barron felt like he had more than just a dream. He had a path. The gym was quiet again, but the echoes of LeBron's words lingered, filling the space with something more than just the sound of bouncing basketballs. It was the sound of possibility. It was a week later when Barron stood outside the sleek glass building of the LeBron James Family Foundation in Akron. His palms were sweating, his heart racing, though he tried his best to calm the nerves that bubbled up with every breath. The moment had come. LeBron's offer wasn't a dream. It was real. But now, Barron wondered if he was truly ready for it. He adjusted his shirt, straightened his jeans, and looked up at the towering structure, the logo of the foundation emblazoned above the doors. This was more than just a place. This was where it all started for LeBron, the foundation of his own success, the place where dreams were not only nurtured but given wings. Barron could hardly believe he was about to walk through those doors. Inside, the walls were lined with photos of kids, athletes, community leaders, and of course, LeBron himself, images of him as a child, as a teenager, as an adult. The walls told a story of growth, of resilience. Barron couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in his chest. I belong here now, he thought. I have to prove it. He was greeted at the front desk by a woman in her 30s, her smile warm but professional. You must be Barron, she said, checking her tablet. LeBron's expecting you. Go right ahead. Barron nodded, his legs heavy as he walked through the corridor that led to the back offices. His breath felt shallow, and his mind buzzed with thoughts. What do I say? What if I mess this up? Before he could overthink it any longer, the door at the end of the hallway opened. LeBron stepped out, wearing a black hoodie with his foundation's logo on it. He looked just like he did on TV, bigger than life, yet somehow approachable. His expression was easy, and there was a light in his eyes that immediately put Barron at ease, even if only for a moment. Hey, Barron, LeBron said with a grin, his voice booming through the hallway. He reached out, offering a handshake that felt firm, grounded. You good? Barron's nerves dissolved a little. LeBron's handshake was strong, but not intimidating. Barron found himself nodding, trying to keep his composure. Yeah, I'm good. Just, excited to be here. LeBron chuckled, guiding Barron into the office. I get it. It's a big moment. But you've got the right energy. That's important. Take a seat. He motioned to a chair across from his desk. Barron sat down, almost too eagerly, then straightened up. It felt surreal being in the same room as LeBron, someone who had become synonymous with greatness. LeBron pulled out a chair and sat opposite him, his eyes focused and calm. Barron, however, was struggling to stay composed. His heart still hadn't slowed. So, Barron, LeBron began, his voice lowering slightly. I've been following your progress. I've seen the tape, talked to a few coaches around town, and I've got to say, I'm impressed. You've got something special. But it's more than just basketball, right? Barron hesitated for a moment before responding. Yeah. It's everything. Basketball is all I've ever wanted to do. But I've got to be honest, it feels like a dream I can't even touch sometimes. I don't have the money to go to an academy or train like the other guys do. So, I just keep practicing on my own, hoping someone might notice. LeBron nodded thoughtfully, his expression softening. I get that. I grew up with the same feeling. You know, when I was your age, I didn't have the access to the resources or the mentors that a lot of the top athletes get. It was hard, but it also made me hungry. And that hunger is something I see in you. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. Barron's eyes widened. So, this isn't just about the scholarship? You're really going to help me? LeBron leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense but encouraging. It's not just about the scholarship, Barron. I'm offering you an opportunity. A real chance to take your game to the next level. But you've got to be all in. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's going to be tough. You've got to give it everything you've got. Barron nodded quickly, his mind swirling with the enormity of what LeBron was offering. I'm ready. I swear I'll do whatever it takes. LeBron smiled, a small, knowing smile that reflected years of hard-earned experience. Good. Because that's what it's going to take. But here's the deal. I'm not just giving you money to train. I'm going to mentor you. I'm going to make sure you have everything you need, not just for basketball, but for life. There's more to being successful than just being good at the game. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to know who you are, and stay grounded. Because if you get distracted or lose focus, you could lose it all. And I'm not going to let that happen to you. Barron felt a surge of gratitude and determination flood through him. He had no idea what to say except the truth. Thank you, LeBron. I won't let you down. I won't. LeBron's gaze softened, and he leaned back in his chair, his hands folded. I know you won't. But you're going to have to work harder than you ever have before. You ready for that? Barron didn't hesitate. Yeah. I've been ready my whole life. LeBron stood up, his powerful frame casting a shadow over the desk. Then let's get to work. First things first, let's start getting you into the right training program, get you a schedule that pushes you. But more importantly, I want to see you keep that drive. The same fire you've got right now. That's what's going to take you places, Barron. As LeBron extended his hand once more, Barron took it without hesitation, his own grip strong, resolute. The reality of it all was still settling in. This was real. He was about to embark on the journey of a lifetime, and the man who had once been his idol was now his mentor, ready to guide him every step of the way. Welcome to the next chapter, Barron. LeBron said, his voice steady, almost like a promise. Barron nodded, feeling something in him shift, a spark of hope he hadn't realized had been missing. Thank you. This is just the beginning. As Barron walked out of LeBron's office, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was his road to walk now. And with LeBron by his side, it didn't seem quite as impossible. The following morning, Barron woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing on his nightstand. The sun had barely risen, and the room was still dim, the soft light of dawn creeping through the cracks of the blinds. He groggily reached for the phone, squinting at the screen. It was a text from LeBron's assistant. Morning, Barron. Your new training schedule and mentorship plan are ready. Meet me at the gym at 8 a.m. Let's get started. Barron blinked, still half-dazed. The reality of it all felt surreal. He had barely slept, his mind racing with everything that had happened in the past week. He rubbed his eyes and sat up. This is real, he thought, feeling both excited and overwhelmed. Today is the start of something bigger than anything I've ever known. He quickly tossed the covers off and stood up. His old sneakers sat in the corner of the room, worn and battered, but for the first time in a long while, Barron didn't feel the weight of his circumstances. Instead, there was a fire igniting in him. He was going to show the world, and LeBron, what he was made of. The boy from Akron had a chance now, and he wasn't going to waste it. By 7:45 a.m., Barron was already at the gym, a bit early, nervously pacing outside. The air was cool, the streets empty and quiet. He couldn't shake the jittery excitement buzzing in his chest. The gym was one he'd driven past countless times but never had the chance to step inside. Now, it felt like a doorway to his future, one that was opening right in front of him. LeBron's assistant, a tall woman with short curly hair, greeted Barron with a smile as she walked out of the building. You're here early, she said, her tone friendly but efficient. That's a good sign. Come on in. Barron followed her through the gym doors, his eyes wide at the sight of the pristine court inside. It looked like something straight out of a professional league, everything sharp and new. The basketballs were all neatly arranged, and the gym smelled faintly of polish and rubber. But what struck Barron the most were the coaches and trainers already setting up in different corners of the gym, stretching, running drills, and preparing for the day. It felt like an arena for greatness. LeBron was already there, standing at the center of the court, chatting with a couple of trainers. He turned when Barron walked in, flashing his familiar smile. "You ready?" LeBron asked, the question coming across with the casualness of someone who knew what it took to succeed, someone who had seen it all. Barron nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." LeBron motioned for him to come closer. "All right. First things first, we're going to see what you've got. We'll start with some basics: your shooting, your footwork, conditioning. The foundation. You can't build a house without a solid base." The next few hours were a blur of motion, dribbling drills, free throws, quick feet, and conditioning exercises that left Barron breathless but exhilarated. Each time he shot the ball, each time he sprinted down the court, Barron felt like he was shedding layers of self-doubt. The harder he worked, the more he could feel his potential unfolding. But the work wasn't easy. It pushed him further than he'd ever gone, both physically and mentally. He was used to playing in pickup games with his friends or alone on the neighborhood courts, but this was different. This was training like a pro. LeBron watched him from the sidelines, occasionally offering advice. "Use your legs more on the jump shot. Your balance is key. And remember, it's all about the follow-through," he would say, his voice guiding Barron's every move. "You've got the skills, Barron. Now it's time to refine them." At noon, when the first session wrapped up, Barron was dripping with sweat, his muscles sore, but there was a satisfaction in the exhaustion. He wiped his face with a towel and grabbed a water bottle, gulping down the cold liquid. LeBron approached him with a nod of approval. "You're looking good," he said. "But it's not just about what you can do on the court. You need to take care of your mind, too. That's where I come in. You've got the physical tools, but the mental game? That's what separates the good from the great." Barron looked at LeBron, intrigued but still processing. "The mental game?" he repeated, trying to understand. LeBron smiled, putting a hand on Barron's shoulder. "Exactly. We'll work on that. Confidence, discipline, focus. All of that. You've got the drive, Barron, but now you need the mindset that will take you where you want to go." The next few weeks were a blur of intensity and growth. Each day, Barron met with LeBron or one of the trainers, working on his skills, learning how to stay calm under pressure, and even practicing his leadership abilities on and off the court. Every time Barron felt like he was hitting a wall, LeBron was there, encouraging him to keep going. But it wasn't just about the drills. LeBron taught Barron how to carry himself with pride, how to show up not just for the game but for the people who counted on him, the ones who believed in him, like his mom. They talked about focus, about sacrifice, about resilience. LeBron shared stories from his own journey, moments when he'd wanted to give up, when things seemed impossible, but he had kept going. "You've got to be your own biggest supporter," LeBron had said one day after practice. "You can't rely on other people to tell you what you're capable of. You've got to know it deep inside." Barron's self-belief grew stronger each day. When the next game came around, he played with a newfound fire, driving to the basket with precision, sinking shots that had once seemed out of reach. It was like all the hard work was finally coming together. By the end of the month, Barron knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was long, but it was clearer now. Every early morning, every hour spent training, every lesson from LeBron was shaping him into something more than just a kid with a dream. He was becoming a player, a student of the game, a person who understood that success was earned, not given. The court felt different now. It felt like his future. And with LeBron in his corner, Barron finally understood what it meant to believe in something bigger than himself. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gym, Barron stood at the free throw line, the ball in his hands. He took a deep breath, focusing not just on the shot but on the journey ahead. And for the first time, he knew that he was ready. The gym felt different today. The air was thick, heavy, as if the weight of the world had settled on Barron's shoulders. His legs were sore from yesterday's drills, his mind clouded with doubt. He could hear the echo of his sneakers on the court as he dribbled aimlessly, the sound sharper than usual, the silence between his movements more profound. It had been 2 months since LeBron took him under his wing, and Barron's progress had been undeniable. He was faster, stronger, his shot more accurate. But there was something gnawing at him. No matter how much he improved, no matter how many accolades and praise he received from his coaches, there was still an unsettling fear in the pit of his stomach. What if I'm not good enough? The question echoed in his head like a broken record. What if all of this is just a dream, and I wake up one day to find that I don't belong? Barron stopped dribbling and stood still in the middle of the court, hands on his knees, breathing heavily. The thought was suffocating, and it had been creeping in more frequently as the weeks passed. Everyone around him, LeBron, the trainers, even his friends, saw his potential. But Barron? He didn't know if he believed it himself anymore. The doubt was relentless. You all right? LeBron's voice broke through Barron's spiraling thoughts. Barron turned, surprised to see LeBron standing at the side of the court. He hadn't even noticed him come in. Yeah, I'm good, Barron said, trying to force a smile. He wiped his forehead with a towel, though he hadn't worked up much of a sweat. Just tired. LeBron didn't buy it. Tired? Or just frustrated? Barron hesitated. The truth was, he didn't know what he was feeling. His progress was visible, but every time he took a step forward, he felt like he was losing ground somewhere else. Could I really make it? Could I really be what LeBron wants me to be? I don't know, Barron finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm not getting any better, even though I'm working harder every day. Like I'm just stuck. LeBron nodded, walking onto the court and stopping in front of Barron. His gaze was steady, unwavering, like he was seeing through all the surface-level doubts Barron was hiding. You think I got where I am because it was easy? LeBron asked, the question cutting through Barron's anxiety. You think I never felt stuck? You think I didn't have days when I doubted myself? Every player, every person, no one's exempt from that. The difference between the ones who make it and the ones who don't is how they handle those moments. Barron looked down, the weight of his thoughts pulling him into a slump. But what if I can't handle it? What if I can't push through the way you did? LeBron crouched down to Barron's level, his eyes intense but compassionate. You've got the heart, Barron. You've got the hustle. But what I've learned, and it took me a long time to figure this out, is that your mind can be your biggest opponent. It'll tell you that you're not good enough. It'll convince you that it's too late. But you can't listen to that voice. You've got to be louder than that voice. You've got to trust yourself even when no one else does. Barron's eyes started to sting, a tightness building in his chest. He didn't want to break down in front of LeBron, but the weight of the pressure, the uncertainty, had been building up for weeks. What if it's not enough? LeBron stood up and took a few steps back, motioning for Barron to follow. Come on. Let's run a few more drills. You're not leaving this gym until we work through this. Barron wanted to argue. He wanted to sit down, to let the doubts overwhelm him, but something in LeBron's words, something in the way LeBron carried himself, told Barron that this was the only way forward. The path through his struggles wasn't about avoidance. It was about facing them head-on, pushing through even when the finish line seemed too far away. For the next 2 hours, Barron worked through drills with a fierceness he hadn't felt before. LeBron didn't let him rest, pushing him harder than he ever had before, but it wasn't just about physical exertion. It was about resilience. LeBron wasn't just shaping Barron's body, he was shaping his mind, teaching him that the real battle was mental. You see that? LeBron asked, after Barron nailed a particularly difficult shot under pressure. That's you, focused, determined, unshakable. Now do it again. Barron nodded, sweat pouring down his face, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. With every dribble, every shot, he was fighting back against his self-doubt, proving to himself that he could do this, that he was good enough. By the time the workout ended, Barron felt exhausted in every sense of the word. His body ached, but there was something else, something lighter, a sense of clarity. The doubts hadn't disappeared, but they had shifted. The fear wasn't gone, but Barron had learned how to face it. As they left the gym, LeBron clapped Barron on the back. You'll have days like this, Barron. Days when it feels impossible. But you've got to keep fighting. And you're stronger than you think. Trust me on that. Barron didn't say anything at first. He just nodded, his head full of the lessons LeBron had imparted, his heart still unsure, but a little less heavy. Later that evening, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Barron reflected on what LeBron had said. He thought about the fear, the doubts, and how they had nearly consumed him. But LeBron's words rang clear in his mind: the difference is how you handle those moments. Tomorrow would be another day. Another chance to prove to himself, and to the world, that he belonged here. The struggle wasn't over, but Barron was beginning to understand that it wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be worth it. And that, more than anything, was what mattered. The gym was quieter than usual that afternoon. Barron stood at the baseline, watching as his teammates ran through a series of drills. His feet were planted firmly on the floor, but his mind had wandered far away from the game. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest ever since his last conversation with LeBron. It was like a shadow, always looming just behind him, threatening to catch up. Lately, the doubts had intensified. The pressure of living up to the expectations, his mother's, LeBron's, his own, felt heavier every day. The scholarship had opened doors, but with each new opportunity, Barron couldn't help but wonder if he truly deserved it. Every time he stepped onto the court, the fear crept in, quietly at first, then louder with every missed shot, every hesitation. What if he wasn't good enough? What if all of this was a mistake? He wiped his hands on his shorts, but his palms were still slick with sweat. He glanced at the clock. The practice was almost over. He didn't feel like shooting anymore. He didn't feel like doing anything. Just then, he heard a familiar voice from across the gym. "Barron!" Barron turned. LeBron was walking toward him, a look of determination in his eyes as usual. But today, there was something else, an energy that Barron couldn't quite place. LeBron stopped in front of him, his eyes scanning Barron's face. "You all right? You've been zoning out all day." Barron didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave a half-hearted shrug. "Just tired, I guess." LeBron didn't buy it. "Tired, huh? I've seen you tired before. This is something else." Barron's stomach twisted. He didn't want to say it. He didn't want to admit how much the pressure was weighing on him, how the fear of failure had begun to eat away at his confidence. But LeBron wasn't going to let him off the hook. "Talk to me," LeBron said, his voice low and calm, like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. "What's really going on?" Barron hesitated, then finally let out a long breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. I don't know if I'm good enough for all of this. I'm grateful, I really am, but it feels like I'm walking on a tightrope, and one wrong step is going to send me falling. I don't know if I can keep up with all the hype. What if it's all just a fluke?" LeBron stood still for a moment, taking it in. He didn't respond immediately, letting the silence settle between them. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You know," LeBron said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of authority. "I've been where you are. I've felt every single thing you're feeling right now. The doubt. The pressure. The fear that maybe, just maybe, I'm not who everyone thinks I am." Barron's eyes widened. He looked up at LeBron, surprised. But you. "I know," LeBron interrupted, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "People look at me and think I've always been the one with all the answers, the one with no fears. But that's not the case. I've had my moments of weakness. I've had days when I thought I wasn't going to make it. When I thought maybe I wasn't good enough." Barron frowned, still unsure. "Then how did you do it? How did you keep going?" LeBron's gaze softened, and for a moment Barron saw something more vulnerable in him, something real. "I didn't do it alone," LeBron said. "I had to learn how to trust myself, but also how to trust the people who believed in me. My family, my coaches, my friends. And I had to stop trying to be perfect. Because perfection is a lie. What matters is resilience. What matters is the ability to get back up, no matter how many times you fall. Barron stood quietly, processing LeBron's words. He felt a warmth spreading through his chest, the same warmth he'd felt when he first stepped onto the court with LeBron. The overwhelming fear started to fade, replaced with a strange clarity. It wasn't about being flawless. It wasn't about meeting expectations. It was about being willing to keep fighting, to keep striving, even when the odds felt impossible. Barron, LeBron said, his voice growing more serious. I've seen something in you since the first day we worked together. It's not just about your talent, though you've got plenty of that. It's about your heart. And I know your heart is what's going to take you where you want to go. So stop doubting yourself. Stop letting fear control you. This journey isn't just about basketball. It's about who you are as a person. You've got what it takes, man. Now, it's time to believe it. Barron's heart raced. The weight he'd been carrying for weeks felt a little lighter now, as though LeBron had reached inside him and taken some of the burden. He still didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, Barron felt like he could face it. I'm ready, Barron said, his voice steady, though he could feel the spark of determination growing inside him. I'm ready to put everything into this. I won't let you down. LeBron nodded, a proud smile breaking across his face. That's the Barron I know. Now, let's finish this practice strong. No more holding back. As they jogged back onto the court, Barron's feet felt lighter, his movements sharper. The gym that had once felt like a prison of doubt was now a place of possibility. With LeBron by his side, he knew he had a chance. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Barron was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. In fact, for the first time, he was excited. The roar of the crowd felt like a distant echo, muffled by the deafening pulse of Barron's heartbeat. His palms were slick with sweat as he dribbled the ball at the top of the key, the familiar court stretching out before him in a blur of flashing lights and moving bodies. But today, it wasn't just any game. Today was the game. The one that could define everything. This was the championship game, the final test of his first season with the academy. The game that LeBron had warned him about. The game that could determine if he had what it took to make it to the next level, to earn a spot on the radar of bigger scouts, maybe even an NBA opportunity. But most importantly, it was the game that could prove to Barron himself that he belonged here. The scoreboard flickered in the background, 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, his team trailing by 2. The gym was packed, parents, coaches, scouts, and his teammates all watching, waiting. The lights were bright, too bright almost, and for a second, Barron felt like he couldn't breathe. The weight of their eyes, the pressure of the moment, it all felt too much. He could already feel the familiar chill of doubt creeping up his spine. What if I screw up? What if I choke? He looked over at the sideline, where LeBron stood, his figure a quiet pillar of calm. LeBron's gaze met his, and without saying a word, he gave Barron a nod, slow, deliberate, full of unspoken trust. Barron felt the tension in his chest ease just slightly. LeBron wasn't worried. He knew what Barron was capable of. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for Barron to start believing in himself the way LeBron believed in him. He snapped back to the game. The ball was passed to him. His teammate, Marcus, cut across the court, and Barron saw the open lane. His mind raced as the defender closed in. Think. Barron had learned to trust his instincts, to read the flow of the game the way he'd once read a book. He feinted left, then quickly spun right, driving toward the basket. The defender lunged, trying to block him, but Barron was too fast. He made it to the paint, just as another defender moved in to close the gap. He was trapped. For a brief second, the court seemed to narrow, the hoop shrinking before his eyes. His breath came in shallow gasps. Focus. Trust your training. Trust your teammates. In that moment, Barron remembered all the hours he'd spent working on his game, on the drills LeBron had pushed him through, on the late nights after practice when he shot free throws alone. He remembered his mom's words. You've got the heart, Barron. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. He felt a shift inside him. The fear, the doubt, the hesitation, all of it faded. He was no longer a kid trying to fit into a world that seemed too big for him. He was a player. He was here for a reason. He belonged. Barron jumped, the ball leaving his fingertips as he soared toward the basket. Time seemed to slow, the world around him falling silent, the only sound the swish of the net as the ball sailed through. The crowd erupted. Yes. His teammate Marcus shouted, pumping his fists. Barron landed lightly on his feet, his body buzzing with adrenaline. The scoreboard flashed, tied game. LeBron's voice boomed from the sideline, calm but firm. That's it, Barron. Keep your head in the game. Barron nodded, heart pounding, eyes locked on the clock. 3 minutes left. One more push. But the game wasn't over. The opponent came charging at them again. This time, it was a fast break, an all-out sprint toward their basket. Barron sprinted back, his legs aching, his mind clear. As the opposing player neared the three-point line, Barron squared up, waiting. The shot went up. Barron jumped, hands stretched, and with a moment's hesitation that felt like eternity, his fingertips brushed against the ball. It was just enough. The shot hit the rim and bounced out. The crowd gasped. Barron was already sprinting in the other direction, the ball in his hands. His team had possession now, and the game was in his hands. He moved quickly down the court, scanning the options. The defenders closed in, but Barron saw Marcus on the wing, open for a three. He made the pass. Shoot it. Barron yelled. Marcus caught the ball, his feet set, and without hesitation, he released the shot. Swish. The gym went wild. Barron's team was up by 3 with just seconds left. The opposing team had no choice but to launch a desperate shot. The buzzer sounded just as the ball sailed through the air. Barron watched as it missed by a mile. The gym exploded in cheers. They had won. Barron sank to his knees, his chest heaving with relief and exhilaration. The crowd was still roaring, but he didn't hear them. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart, and the voice in his head. I did it. He could feel the weight of it, the weight of everything he'd overcome. This wasn't just a game. It was a moment of truth. He had stepped up when it mattered, and in that moment, Barron knew something fundamental had changed within him. He wasn't just playing for the scholarship, or for LeBron, or even for his mom anymore. He was playing for himself. And that made all the difference. As his teammates swarmed around him, lifting him into the air, Barron caught LeBron's eye from across the court. LeBron's face was lit with pride, but there was no surprise in his expression. It was the look of someone who had known all along what Barron was capable of. Barron grinned, his mind finally at ease. This was only the beginning. The sun was setting over Akron, casting a warm golden glow across the city as Barron walked home, the weight of the championship wind still buzzing through his veins. His footsteps echoed on the quiet sidewalk, his breath steady, but a sense of peace that had eluded him for months now settled over him. The game was over. The pressure had lifted, and in its place was something more powerful, a quiet, unshakable confidence. He had proven something to himself, something no one could take away. Barron pulled his jacket tighter against the evening chill, feeling the lightness in his chest, the release of all the tension he'd carried for so long. As he passed familiar houses and street corners, he thought about the boy who had once dreamed of basketball from his small, crowded apartment, the boy who had been afraid he wouldn't make it. That boy was still inside him, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He reached his building, took the stairs 2 at a time, and knocked on the door to his apartment. The door creaked open, and his mom, Monica, stood there, her face lighting up when she saw him. She didn't ask how the game had gone. She didn't need to. She saw it in his eyes, in the way he walked, in the way his shoulders were squared. He was different now. You did it, didn't you? She asked, her voice full of pride, though she tried to keep it steady. Barron smiled, stepping inside. Yeah, Mom. We did. She hugged him, and he let himself sink into the warmth of her embrace. This moment, the quiet, simple joy of sharing his success with her, was everything. She had always been there, a constant in his life, even when the world felt uncertain. And now, he had something to show for it. All the sacrifices, all the long nights of worry, all the sacrifices she made for him, it had all led to this moment. "I'm so proud of you, Barron," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Barron pulled back slightly, looking at her with a smile. "We're just getting started, Mom." Monica smiled, brushing a tear from her eye. "I always knew you'd make it, Barron. I just knew." They sat down together, sharing a quiet dinner, and as they ate, Barron's mind drifted back to the gym. Back to LeBron's face when the final buzzer rang, back to the pride in his mentor's eyes, the same pride Barron had seen in his own reflection. He thought about the promise he had made to himself, the promise to keep pushing, to keep believing in himself, even when things felt impossible. Later that night, as he sat at his desk, the familiar hum of the streetlights outside blending with the silence of the apartment, Barron picked up his phone and dialed LeBron's number. It rang twice before LeBron picked up. "You made it, didn't you?" LeBron's voice was warm, full of knowing. Barron grinned. "Yeah. We did. That's what I like to hear." LeBron's voice grew more serious. "But remember, this is just the beginning, Barron. You've got the skills, the heart, and now, you've got the belief. Don't let anyone, or anything, take that away from you." Barron nodded, even though LeBron couldn't see him. "I won't. I'm ready." LeBron chuckled softly. "Good. Because the next challenge is already waiting for you." Barron's heart beat faster. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he didn't need to. Whatever came next, he was ready. And with LeBron's support, and his mom's love, he knew he could face it. "Thanks, LeBron," Barron said. "For everything." "No problem, kid. You earned it." As Barron ended the call and set the phone down, a sense of calm washed over him. He wasn't the same kid he had been a year ago. The boy who had been lost in doubt and fear. Now, he was a young man with purpose, a purpose that went beyond basketball. He wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. He was living it. Barron leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. The stars were starting to shine bright against the darkening sky. He wasn't sure where his journey would take him, but he knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The road ahead was long, and there would be more challenges, more obstacles, but Barron felt ready. Because, finally, he knew who he was, and he knew his worth. And with that knowledge, Barron smiled. The future was his to claim.